NIST holds equity in an underperforming or failing company. Could the government be pressured to use taxpayer dollars to hedge losses? Is NIST equipped to make these decisions to protect U.S. taxpayer funds?
Yo, what's up everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Before we get into this clip, I gotta say something. I've watched a lot of Senate confirmation hearings for this channel, and most of them are boring political theater. Nobody actually asks anything real. This one's different. We're looking at a hearing with Ted Cruz questioning nominees for NIST and NASA leadership. And regardless of how you feel about Cruz politically, the guy came prepared. He's not lobbing softballs. He's asking about government equity stakes in private companies, whether federal agencies have been weaponized to police speech under the banner of safety, and whether we're serious about beating China to the moon. Real questions, real stakes.
So here's the plan.
We watch the full clip together, then I'll break down why I think Cruz asked exactly the right questions, especially on the NIST accountability stuff and the space policy stuff. Stick around for that. Before we press play, smash the like button, subscribe if you're new, and drop a comment. Should government agencies be taking equity stakes in private companies? I want your take before you hear mine. Let's get into it.
Also wanted to point out that the Air Force Academy has more astronauts than Purdue.
Fantastic.
Touché.
For the record, Colombians are much faster than Cubans.
They're also more likely to be drug dealers. This is an age-old battle between Cubans and Colombians. I seem to have stepped in the middle of some battle here. And while we are comparing connections to the moon, I will point out one of the very first words uttered on the surface of the moon was my hometown of Houston. Houston, the Eagle has landed. And that. All right, let's get into, Dr. Rahman, let's start with you. The first Trump administration's AI initiative emphasized NIST's role in developing basic measurement standards for AI. Under the Biden administration, NIST used its authorities to inspect AI systems for risks from bias and misinformation. At the time, NIST claimed that even when, quote, harmful biases are mitigated, AI is not necessarily fair because it could, quote, exacerbate existing disparities or systematic biases. That is a bowdlerized way of policing speech on climate change, transgenderism, immigration, and political topics. Elsewhere, NIST called workplace DEI czars critical and suggested companies consider whether AI chatbots might amplify historical, societal, and systemic biases. NIST's testing standards became a Trojan horse for progressive social policies with the goal of controlling American speech. Dr. Rahman, does NIST have any role in using its measurement and non-regulatory roles to regulate AI speech or to engage in censorship?
No, it does not.
Do you commit to reorienting NIST to its apolitical mission and ensuring that it does not serve as an engine for divisive left-wing ideology, even under the guise of, quote, safety or increasing trust in technology?
I do, Senator.
Thank you. Do you also commit to maintaining NIST as a strictly non-regulatory agency that works through voluntary consensus-based standards?
I do, Senator.
Thank you. All right. NIST often touches on strategic supply chains, such as for semiconductors and critical minerals. Recently, NIST executed letters of intent whereby the federal government would take equity ownership in semiconductor and critical minerals companies, an approach that deviates from NIST's traditional role. Consider critical mineral mining, a complex, complicated industry where sometimes it takes over 20 years to discover mineral deposits, to verify them, to build the needed infrastructure, and to receive the required licenses and permits. Would you agree that federal equity deals tie up taxpayer dollars for a considerable amount of time with no guaranteed return on investment?
Senator, I'm not in the role, so I don't know the details of what may or may not have happened in this case, but I'm committed to making sure that NIST makes best use of resources provided by Congress to advance semiconductor manufacturing and leadership globally.
If NIST holds equity in an underperforming or failing company, could the government be pressured to use taxpayer dollars to hedge losses? Is NIST equipped to make these decisions to protect U.S. taxpayer funds?
Again, Senator, not being in the role, I don't know the details of what may or may not have transpired, so I'm really not in a position to answer that.
In complex sectors like critical minerals, companies often struggle against international competition. Since government ownership comes with risks and taxpayers could end up covering losses, wouldn't it make sense for the government to streamline permitting and encourage domestic competition instead of trying to own and subsidize these companies?
Thank you for that question, Senator. Again, this is outside, I think, the swim lane of NIST, but I'm happy to follow up in conversations about what the role of innovation might be in critical materials processing and manufacturing.
Mr. Anderson, if you are confirmed, describe for this committee what you hope and expect NASA to do regarding the moon.
Senator, I hope and expect that NASA continues to quickly execute the President's national space policy that has been completely supported by yourself, and as we saw yesterday, this entire committee, and we appreciate that at NASA. I think they expect NASA to exercise leadership, talk about space superiority. If you look at that executive order that the President laid out, it was not just national security, it was NASA. There was a whole lot of government parts to that, and there was an order from the President that said, hey, we're going to make sure American space superiority is ensured. It has been backed up by funding. It has been backed up by authorizations and appropriations, and I think that's what the American public expects.
What level of priority would you put to beating China to the moon?
The absolute highest priority, Senator.
That would be the right answer, so I'm glad to hear it. Discuss also the importance of maintaining and keeping astronauts in low Earth orbit as we transition from the International Space Station to commercial space stations.
Thank you, Senator. It's absolutely critical. The first word of the ISS is international, and that means we have a lot of partners invested in this. And it's also competition with China. Our adversary is already in low Earth orbit. We cannot cede American leadership in low Earth orbit.
Well, thank you to both of the witnesses. My final question is required of all nominees. If confirmed, do you pledge to work collaboratively with this committee to provide thorough and timely responses to the committee's requests and to appear before the committee when requested?
Yes. I do.
Thank you. I have 45 letters of support from various organizations for the nomination of Mr. Anderson. I ask unanimous consent that these letters be inserted into the hearing record without objection, so ordered. Senators will have until the close of business on Saturday, March 7th to submit questions for the record. The nominees will have until the close of business on Tuesday, March 10th to respond to those questions. And with that, that concludes today's hearing. The committee stands adjourned.
Okay, a lot to unpack there. Let's go piece by piece. First, the NIST speech stuff. This is the part that really got me. Cruz lays out a history where NIST, an agency meant for measurement and standards, drifted under the previous administration into territory where bias mitigation in AI started looking like a backdoor for policing speech on hot-button issues. I'm not saying every AI fairness initiative is some deep state conspiracy, but Cruz's point is fair. If an unelected technical agency starts defining harmful bias in a way that lines up with one side of the political spectrum, that's a problem. That's not science. That's ideology in a lab coat. I actually respect that the nominee didn't dodge it. He flatly said NIST has no role in regulating AI speech and committed on the record to keeping the agency apolitical and voluntary standards-based. That's the right answer, and Cruz was smart to get it on record. Second, the equity stakes issue. This might be the sleeper topic of the whole hearing. Most people will clip the moon stuff and skip past this, but I think it's the most important exchange. The government taking direct equity ownership in semiconductor and critical minerals companies is a huge departure from how these agencies normally operate. Cruz's question was simple. What happens when one of these companies underperforms? Does the taxpayer eat that loss? That's not a partisan question. That's basic fiscal responsibility. If the government's playing venture capitalist with public money in an industry where permitting a loan can take 20 years, you should want oversight on that. The nominee hedged a bit, saying he wasn't in the role yet, so he couldn't speak to specifics. Fair enough for someone not yet confirmed. But Cruz's underlying point stands. Streamlining permitting and encouraging competition is a more sustainable strategy than the government trying to pick winners and losers with equity stakes. Then the NASA stuff, and this is what really gets me fired up. What level of priority would you put on beating China to the moon? The absolute highest priority, Senator. That's exactly the answer you want to hear. We're in a real space race again, whether people want to admit it or not. The idea that we'd cede low Earth orbit or lunar leadership to a strategic competitor because of budget squabbling or bureaucratic drift is genuinely alarming. Cruz pushing on maintaining astronaut presence during the transition from the ISS to commercial space stations is exactly the kind of question that needs to be asked out loud, on record. Bottom line for me, whatever you think about Cruz as a political figure, this hearing is a good example of what oversight should look like. He's not performing for the cameras. He's asking pointed, specific, follow-up-driven questions about accountability, mission creep, and strategic priorities. That's the job. Let me know in the comments. What do you think was the most important moment in this hearing? The AI and speech angle, the equity stakes issue, or the space race stuff? I genuinely want to know. If you liked this breakdown, hit the like button, subscribe for more hearing reactions, and I'll see you in the next one.
Peace.